After I became a millionaire, my ex-husband insisted on a private talk. My name is Diane Harlow. I own 7 boutique hotels scattered across Southern California, from the cliffs of Laguna Beach to the desert edges of Palm Springs. I didn't inherit this empire. I built it, room by room, loan by loan, sleep-deprived night after sleep-deprived night. And when I finally stood at the top, when my name started appearing in Architectural Digest and Forbes, when influencers flew in just to photograph my lobbies, he called. It had been 6 years. 6 years since I signed the divorce papers in a lawyer's office that smelled like old carpet and regret. 6 years since he told me I was chasing a fantasy and that I didn't understand how the real world worked. 6 years since he packed his things, looked at me with something close to pity, and walked out of our small rental in Long Beach, the one with the broken air conditioner and the neighbor's dog that barked all night. I remember that day clearly. I was sitting on the floor surrounded by fabric swatches and mood boards for a hotel concept that existed only in my mind. He stood in the doorway with his suitcase and said, "Diane, this isn't going anywhere, and neither are you." I didn't cry. Not then. I just nodded. And when the door closed, I went back to my swatches. But here's the thing no one tells you about success. It doesn't erase the past. It just reframes it, makes it shinier, more complicated. And when the past shows up at your door asking for a private talk, you can't help but wonder what it wants from the woman you've become. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Like this video, so this story reaches more hearts, and subscribe for the next journeys. The call came on a Thursday evening in late September. I was standing on the terrace of my flagship hotel in Malibu, the Harlow Estate, watching the sun melt into the Pacific. The sky was the color of champagne and bruised peaches. The air smelled like salt and jasmine from the garden below. Everything around me whispered luxury, arrival, proof. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something, instinct, curiosity, the universe's sense of irony, made me swipe. Diane. I knew the voice immediately. Deep, steady. The same voice that used to tell me I was being unrealistic when I sketched hotel layouts on napkins during dinner. Matthew. A pause. I could hear him breathing. I imagined him rehearsing this moment, choosing his words carefully. I know this is unexpected, he said. But I'd really like to talk. In person. Just the two of us. Privately. My hand tightened around the phone. The ocean below looked darker suddenly. Colder. Why? I asked. Another pause. Because there's something I need to say. Something I should have said a long time ago. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to delete his number and pretend the last 6 years had erased him entirely. But I didn't. Because deep down, beneath all the success and the confidence and the empire I'd built with my own hands, there was still a part of me that needed to know. What could he possibly want to say now? And why did it feel like a door I'd locked years ago was suddenly rattling open? I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I told him I'd think about it. Then I ended the call and stood there on the terrace for another 20 minutes, watching the last traces of daylight disappear into the horizon. The wind picked up. The jasmine scent turned sharper. My chest felt tight in a way I hadn't experienced in years, not since the early days, when I was drowning in debt and doubt and the constant fear that I'd made a terrible mistake. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through the halls of the Harlow estate like a ghost in my own creation. The marble floors gleamed under soft Edison bulbs. The velvet furniture in the lounge looked like it had been stolen from a French chateau. Fresh peonies sat in crystal vases on every surface. Everything was perfect. Everything was mine. But Matthew's voice kept echoing in my head. There's something I need to say. What could it be? An apology? A confession? Some attempt to reconcile now that I was worth something? The possibilities circled my mind like vultures. I poured myself a glass of wine from the hotel bar, a Pinot Noir from a vineyard I'd once visited in Sonoma, and sat in the library. The room smelled like leather and old books I'd collected at estate sales. I designed this space to feel like a sanctuary, a place where time slowed down, where you could breathe. But tonight, I couldn't, because Matthew's call had cracked something open, a memory I'd buried beneath years of work and success and carefully constructed confidence. It was something he'd said the night he left. Not the cruel part about me not going anywhere. That I remembered clearly. That I'd used as fuel every single day since. No. It was something else. Something quieter. Something he'd whispered right before he walked out the door. So softly I almost didn't hear it. I'd never let myself think about it. Not once in 6 years. But now, sitting in my library with wine warming my throat and the ocean humming outside, I couldn't stop replaying it. The next morning, I threw myself into work. I had a site visit scheduled in Palm Springs for a new property I was acquiring. A mid-century modern gem that had been abandoned for a decade. The bones were good. The location was perfect. But it needed vision. It needed someone who could see past the decay and imagine something beautiful. That's what I do. I take broken things and make them whole again. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent the afternoon walking through empty rooms with my architect, discussing layouts and light sources and which walls we could tear down. The desert heat pressed against the windows. Dust floated in the air like tiny galaxies. My architect, a brilliant woman named Carmen, kept talking about opening up the space and letting the landscape in. But I was only half listening, because my phone kept buzzing in my pocket. Matthew had texted 3 times. I didn't read them, not right away. I let them sit there, unopened, like small bombs I wasn't ready to defuse. When I finally got back to my car, a sleek black Range Rover that still smelled like new leather, I sat in the driver's seat and stared at my phone. The first text was simple. I understand if you need time. The second was more vulnerable. I need you to hear me out. Please. The third made my stomach twist. It's about what I said the night I left. My hands went cold. So he remembered too. I sat there in the desert heat, windows up, air conditioning blasting, and let myself remember the full moment, the one I'd been avoiding. He'd been standing in the doorway with his suitcase. He'd just told me I wasn't going anywhere. And then, right before he turned to leave, he'd looked back at me, really looked at me, and said something so quiet I'd convinced myself I'd imagined it. But I hadn't imagined it, and now he wanted to talk about it. I started the car and drove back to Malibu with my heart pounding, and the sunset turning the desert gold behind me. Whatever he wanted to say. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it, but I also knew I couldn't keep running from it. I told myself I wouldn't respond. But by the time I reached Malibu, as the highway curved along the coastline and the ocean stretched out endlessly to my right, I'd already drafted 3 different replies in my head. Each one sounded wrong. Too cold, too eager, too much like the woman I used to be. The one who needed his approval, who second-guessed every decision, who believed him when he said I wasn't built for this kind of life. I parked in the private lot behind the Harlow estate and sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel. The sun was setting again. It always seemed to be setting lately, as if time itself was trying to tell me something. Through the rearview mirror, I could see the hotel glowing softly in the dusk. Warm light spilled from the windows. Guests moved through the lobby like elegant shadows. My staff, People I'd hired, trained, trusted, went about their evening routines with precision and grace. This was my world now. Matthew had no place in it. So why did his voice still have so much power over me? I went up to my private suite on the top floor, a space I rarely used because I was always working, always moving between properties, always proving something to someone I couldn't quite name. The suite was decorated in soft creams and pale blues, with floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the ocean. Minimalist, serene, the kind of space that was supposed to make you feel calm. But I didn't feel calm. I felt like I was 16 again, standing in front of my high school, watching the boy I liked walk past me without noticing. Small, invisible, uncertain of my own worth. I poured myself another glass of wine, a bad habit I'd developed lately, and sat on the balcony. The breeze was cool now. The ocean sounded like breathing. I opened Matthew's texts again and read them slowly, one by one, as if they were written in a language I'd forgotten how to speak. It's about what I said the night I left. My chest tightened, because I knew exactly what he'd said. The words I'd spent 6 years pretending I hadn't heard. He'd been in the doorway, suitcase in hand, eyes tired and frustrated and done with me. He'd delivered his final verdict, that I was chasing a fantasy, that I didn't understand the real world, that I wasn't going anywhere. And then, just as he turned to leave, he'd glanced back. His expression had shifted. Something softer, something almost regretful. And he'd whispered, "I'm sorry." Just that. 2 words. So quiet I'd almost missed them beneath the sound of my own heartbreak. At the time, I'd convinced myself I'd misheard, that he couldn't possibly have apologized after everything he'd just said, that it didn't make sense. So I buried it. I focused on surviving, on proving him wrong, on building something so undeniable that no one, not him, not anyone, could ever call me unrealistic again. But now, sitting on this balcony with the ocean humming below and his texts glowing on my screen, I couldn't ignore it anymore. What had he been apologizing for? For leaving? For not believing in me? For something else entirely? And why, after 6 years of silence, did he suddenly need to explain? I set my phone down and closed my eyes. The wind moved through my hair. Somewhere below, I could hear guests laughing in the garden. The soft clink of champagne glasses. The world moving forward while I sat here, stuck in a moment I couldn't escape. There was something else too. Something I hadn't let myself think about. The truth was, I hadn't been perfect either. When Matthew left, I'd been so consumed by my dream, by the hotels I wanted to build, the life I wanted to create, that I'd stopped seeing him, stopped asking him about his day, stopped noticing when he was tired or scared or feeling left behind. I'd been so desperate to prove I was enough that I'd forgotten to make space for anyone else. And maybe that's what he wanted to talk about. Not his mistakes, but mine. The thought made my stomach turn. Because if that was true, if he wanted to hold up a mirror and show me the parts of myself I'd been avoiding, I wasn't sure I was ready to look. I opened my eyes and stared out at the ocean. The sky was almost dark now. The stars were starting to appear, faint and fragile against the deepening blue. I picked up my phone and typed a response before I could change my mind. Okay, when and where? I hit send. And then I sat there, heart pounding, waiting for the door I'd locked 6 years ago to finally swing open. He suggested neutral ground, a small cafe in Santa Monica. Quiet, out of the way. The kind of place no one would recognize me, or care if they did. I arrived 15 minutes early, which I immediately regretted. It gave me too much time to think. Too much time to second guess. Too much time to notice every detail of the space. The worn wooden tables, the chipped ceramic mugs, the faint smell of burnt coffee and old pastries. This wasn't my world. My world was marble and champagne and ocean views. This place felt like a step backward, like returning to the life I'd escaped. I ordered an espresso I didn't want and sat by the window, watching the street. Tourists wandered past with shopping bags and sunburned shoulders. A street musician played guitar on the corner. Everything felt ordinary, painfully, aggressively ordinary. And then I saw him. Matthew walked toward the cafe with his hands in his pockets, head slightly down, moving with the same careful deliberation I remembered. He looked older, thinner. His hair had more gray. He was wearing jeans and a simple button-down. Nothing expensive, nothing designed to impress. He looked like someone who'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. When he walked through the door and our eyes met, I felt it. That old pull. Not attraction, exactly. Something deeper, more complicated. The kind of connection that doesn't disappear just because you want it to. He sat down across from me without ordering anything. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. I nodded. Didn't trust my voice yet. For a moment, we just sat there. Two people who used to know everything about each other. Now strangers separated by 6 years and 1,000 unspoken truths. "You look incredible," he said finally. "I mean, I've seen the articles, the features, but seeing you in person, don't," I said. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Don't do that." He looked down. "Sorry, I just meant..." "I know what you meant." Another silence. This one longer, heavier. "Why am I here, Matthew?" I asked. "What do you need to say that couldn't be said over the phone?" He took a breath, let it out slowly. "I need to explain what happened. The real reason I left." My stomach dropped. "You already explained," I said carefully. "You said I was chasing a fantasy, that I didn't understand the real world, that I wasn't going anywhere." "I know." His voice cracked slightly. "And I've regretted those words every single day since." I waited. Didn't give him anything. Made him work for it. "The truth is, I didn't leave because I didn't believe in you, Diane. I left because I was terrified." I blinked. Terrified of what? Of watching you succeed without me. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. "I could see it," he continued, his voice low and urgent now, as if he'd been holding this in for years. "Even back then, even when we were broke and living in that terrible apartment, I could see the fire in you, the determination. The way you'd stay up until 3 a.m. sketching plans and calling investors and refusing to give up." He looked directly at me now. His eyes were wet. "And I knew," he said. "I knew you were going to make it. I knew you were going to build something extraordinary. And I also knew I'd never be able to keep up." My chest felt tight. I couldn't breathe properly. "So you left," I said slowly. "Not because you didn't believe in me, but because you did." "Yes." The word landed like a stone in still water. "I convinced myself I was doing the right thing," he said, "that I was being honest, that it was better to leave before you realized how much I was holding you back. But the truth is, I was a coward. I was so afraid of being left behind that I left first." I stared at him. This man I'd spent years resenting, years using as fuel, years telling myself I'd proven wrong. And suddenly, all of it felt hollow, because he hadn't been the villain in this story. He'd been scared, just like I'd been scared, just like we'd both been drowning in our own insecurities and too young and too stubborn to admit it. "And that's why you apologized," I whispered. "The night you left, right before you walked out. You said you were sorry." He nodded. "You heard that?" "Barely." "I meant it," he said, "but I didn't know how to explain, and by the time I figured it out, you were gone. You'd built this whole empire. You didn't need me anymore. You never did." Something inside me cracked. "That's not true," I said, my voice breaking. "I needed you. I needed you to believe in me. I needed you to stay." "I know," he said quietly, "and I failed you." The cafe suddenly felt too small, too warm. I could feel tears building behind my eyes, and I hated it. Hated that he could still do this to me. Hated that after everything I'd built, after all the proof I'd accumulated, I was still that woman sitting on the floor surrounded by fabric swatches, watching the man she loved walk away. "Why now?" I asked. "Why tell me this now?" He hesitated. "Because I'm getting married." The world stopped. "What?" "In 3 months," he said. "To someone wonderful. Someone I love. And before I do, I needed to make this right. I needed you to know the truth. That you weren't the problem. That you were never the problem. It was always me." I sat there, frozen, as the weight of it all pressed down on me. He was getting married, moving on, building a life. And he'd come here to absolve himself, to clear his conscience, to make himself feel better. Not for me, for him. "So this is closure," I said flatly. "This is you tying up loose ends before your wedding." "No." "Yes." I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "That's exactly what this is." "Diane, please." But I was already walking toward the door, my vision blurred, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. Behind me, I heard him call my name, but I didn't turn around. I stepped out onto the street, into the harsh afternoon sunlight, and kept walking. Blocko 5. Vulnerability and honesty. I drove north along the Pacific Coast Highway with no destination in mind. The windows were down. The wind tore through the car. The ocean roared beside me, wild and indifferent. I didn't put on music. I didn't call anyone. I just drove until the anger started to fade and something else took its place. Something quieter. Something that felt like grief. I ended up in Ventura, nearly an hour from Malibu, sitting in the parking lot of a beach I'd never visited before. The sand was gray. The water was choppy. A few surfers bobbed in the waves like question marks. I turned off the engine and sat there, staring at nothing. Matthew was getting married. The thought kept circling my mind, searching for a place to land. And the strangest part was, I wasn't heartbroken. Not in the way I thought I'd be. I didn't want him back. I didn't love him anymore. Not like that. But something about his confession had shaken me, because he'd loved me. In his own terrified, self-sabotaging way, he'd loved me. And he'd left not because I wasn't enough, but because he believed he wasn't enough. And for 6 years, I'd been running on the fuel of his rejection, building my empire on the foundation of his doubt, proving to a ghost that I was worthy. But what if the ghost had never doubted me at all? What if I'd been fighting the wrong battle this entire time? I got out of the car and walked down to the beach. The sand was cold beneath my feet. The wind smelled like salt and seaweed. I stood at the edge of the water and let the waves rush over my ankles, numbing my skin. The truth I'd been avoiding was this. I hadn't built my life for me. I'd built it to prove something, to someone who'd already believed in me, even if he couldn't stay. And now that the truth was out, now that the villain of my story had revealed himself to be just as broken and scared as I'd been, I didn't know what I was building for anymore. The hotels, the success, the empire with my name etched into marble lobbies and luxury linens. What was it all for? I thought about my days, how I moved from property to property like a wind-up toy, how I rarely stayed in one place long enough to feel anything, how I surrounded myself with beauty, but never let anyone close enough to see the parts of me that were still uncertain, still afraid, still that girl on the floor with her fabric swatches and her impossible dreams. I'd become successful, but had I become happy? The question sat in my chest like a stone. I pulled out my phone and stared at Matthew's last unanswered text, the one I'd ignored when I walked out of the cafe. "I'm sorry. That came out wrong. Can we please talk again?" I sat down on the sand, not caring that it would ruin my clothes, and typed a response. "You didn't come out wrong. You came out honest. And maybe that's what I needed to hear." I paused, then added, "I've spent 6 years building a life to prove you wrong, but you were never wrong about me. You were wrong about yourself." Another pause. My fingers hovered over the screen. "I don't need your apology, but I do need to forgive you. And maybe forgive myself too." I hit send before I could overthink it. The sun was starting to lower. The surfers were paddling back to shore. The world kept moving, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out on its edges. My phone buzzed almost immediately. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Then a moment later, "For what it's worth, I always knew you'd do something extraordinary. I just wish I'd been brave enough to stay and watch." I read the message 3 times, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not the angry, bitter tears I'd shed the night he left. Not the frustrated tears I'd cried when loans fell through, or investors said no, or I worked 70-hour weeks and wondered if I'd ever make it. These were different, softer, quieter. The kind of tears that come when you finally let go of something you've been carrying for too long. I sat there on that cold beach in Ventura, watching the sun turn the ocean gold, and I let myself feel all of it. The anger, the relief, the grief for the version of myself who'd believed that success would fill the empty spaces inside her. Because it hadn't. It had just built more beautiful rooms to be lonely in. When I finally drove back to Malibu, the sky was dark and the stars were out. I felt lighter somehow, emptier, but in a good way, like I'd cleared out a closet I'd been avoiding for years. I parked behind the Harlow estate and walked through the lobby. My night manager, a kind woman named Sylvia, smiled at me. "Good evening, Ms. Harlow. Everything okay?" I paused, looked around at the space I'd created, the soft lighting, the velvet furniture, the fresh flowers, the guests sipping wine by the fireplace, their faces warm and content. It was beautiful, but it wasn't everything. "Yes," I said finally, "everything's okay." And for the first time in 6 years, I almost believed it. The weeks that followed were strange, not bad, not painful, just different. I kept working. I kept moving between properties. I kept doing all the things I'd always done. But something had shifted. Something subtle. Like a frequency I'd been tuned to for years had finally changed, and now I could hear sounds I'd been missing all along. I started noticing things. The way my housekeeper at the Palm Springs property hummed while she worked. The way the young couple checking into the Laguna Beach Hotel held hands like they were afraid to let go. The way the sunset looked different every single evening, never the same twice, always offering something new if you bothered to pay attention. I started slowing down. Not in my work. I was still ambitious, still driven, still building. But I stopped treating my life like a race I had to win. I started eating lunch instead of skipping it. I started taking walks on the beach instead of answering emails at midnight. I started asking my staff about their lives, really asking, and listening to their answers. And I started spending more time in my suite at the Harlow estate, the space I'd designed but barely inhabited, the room with the ocean view and the soft blue walls and the silence that used to terrify me. I learned to sit with it. One evening in late October, I was on my balcony with a book I'd been meaning to read for months, some memoir about a woman who'd walked across Spain searching for meaning. The air was cool, the ocean was calm. The sky was turning that particular shade of violet that only exists right before darkness. My phone rang. Matthew. I stared at his name on the screen, surprised at how little it affected me now. No racing heart, no clenched stomach, just curiosity. I answered. Hi. Hi. He sounded nervous. Is this a bad time? No, I'm just reading. Oh, that's nice. A pause. I could hear him breathing, gathering courage. I wanted to tell you something, he said finally. And I know this might sound strange, but I called off the wedding. I sat up straighter. What? 2 weeks ago, I called it off. Matthew. No, wait. Let me explain. His voice was steady now, clear. After we talked, after you said what you said about me being wrong about myself, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I realized I was doing the same thing again. I was marrying someone wonderful, someone I cared about, but for the wrong reasons. What reasons? Because it felt safe. Because she didn't challenge me. Because I knew I'd never have to worry about being left behind. I closed my eyes. That's not fair to her. I know. That's why I ended it. She deserves someone who chooses her because she makes him brave, not because she makes him comfortable. The words settled between us. I'm not telling you this because I want you back, he continued quickly. I know we're not. I'm telling you because you helped me see something I'd been avoiding my whole life. That I've been living scared. And I don't want to do that anymore. I felt something warm spread through my chest. I'm glad, I said softly. I mean it. I'm glad you figured that out. Thank you. He paused. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy, Diane? Like, really happy? The question caught me off guard. I looked out at the ocean, at the hotel below, at the empire I'd built with my own hands and my own determination, and my own relentless need to prove something to someone who'd never doubted me. I'm getting there, I said honestly. Good. His voice was warm, genuine. You deserve that. We talked for a few more minutes. Easy conversation. Nothing heavy. Nothing weighted with the past. And when we said goodbye, I realized something. I'd forgiven him. Completely. Not because he'd apologized or explained or given me closure, but because I'd finally stopped needing him to be the villain in my story. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety or heartbreak or any of the old ghosts, but from something else. Something that felt almost like clarity. I got up and walked through the hotel. It was past midnight. The guests were asleep. The lobby was empty except for the night clerk reading a paperback at the desk. The only sounds were the distant crash of waves and the soft hum of the building settling into itself. I stood in the center of the lobby and looked around. this place, this beautiful, elegant, carefully constructed space. It was mine, but it wasn't me. Not entirely. I'd built it to prove I was worthy, to show the world and myself that I was capable of something extraordinary. And I had. I'd succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, but somewhere along the way, I'd lost track of why I'd wanted it in the first place. I'd wanted to create spaces where people felt safe, where they could rest, where they could be themselves without pretense or performance. But I'd never given that gift to myself. I walked back upstairs to my suite and stood on the balcony. The ocean was dark. The stars were sharp and cold. The wind moved through my hair like a whisper. And then I remembered something. Something Matthew had said that night he left. Not the part about me chasing a fantasy. Not the quiet apology in the doorway. Something else. Something I'd buried so deep I'd almost convinced myself it hadn't happened. Right before he whispered, "I'm sorry," right before he turned to leave for good, he'd looked at me, really looked at me, and said one more thing. Something I'd never let myself hear until now. My breath caught, because suddenly, I understood. I understood what he'd really been apologizing for, what he'd been carrying all these years, what he'd needed to tell me but couldn't find the words. And I understood why it had taken me 6 years to be ready to hear it. The truth was right there. It had always been right there. I just hadn't been ready to see it, until now. The words he'd said that night, the ones I'd buried, came back to me with perfect clarity. He'd been standing in the doorway, suitcase in hand. We'd just finished the worst fight of our marriage. He'd told me I was chasing a fantasy, that I didn't understand the real world, that I wasn't going anywhere. And then his face had changed, softened, and he'd looked at me with something that wasn't pity or frustration or disappointment. It was love, pure, terrified, heartbroken love. And he'd said, "I wish I could be the man you see when you look at me." That's what I'd buried. Not his cruelty, not his doubt, but his vulnerability, his admission that he wasn't leaving because I'd failed him. He was leaving because he believed he'd failed me. All this time, I'd built my empire on the foundation of his rejection. But it had never been rejection at all. It had been surrender. He'd loved me enough to let me go, to step aside so I could become who I was meant to be without the weight of his insecurity holding me back. And that quiet, "I'm sorry," in the doorway. He'd been apologizing for not being brave enough to grow with me, for choosing fear over faith, for loving me, but not trusting himself enough to stay. I stood on that balcony with tears streaming down my face and finally understood. I hadn't been proving Matthew wrong all these years. I'd been proving myself right. Right that I was capable. Right that I was worthy. Right that the dreams I'd sketched on napkins and fabric swatches were real and attainable and mine. But I'd gotten so lost in the proving that I'd forgotten the dreaming. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I canceled all my meetings. I told my assistant I was taking the day off. She looked at me like I'd announced I was moving to Mars, but she didn't argue. I drove to Long Beach, to the neighborhood where Matthew and I had lived in that small rental with the broken air conditioner and the barking dog next door. The building was still there, painted a different color now. The landscaping was better, but it was the same place. I parked across the street and sat in my car, looking up at what used to be our window. And I remembered the version of myself who'd lived there. The one who worked 3 jobs and stayed up until 3 a.m. sketching plans. The one who called investors from the bathroom at work because it was the only quiet place. The one who believed so fiercely in something that didn't exist yet that she was willing to risk everything. Her marriage, her security, her comfort, to make it real. I'd spent 6 years thinking that woman had been foolish, naive. too ambitious for her own good. But sitting there, looking up at that window, I realized something. She'd been brave. Braver than the version of myself who owned 7 hotels and wore designer clothes and had her name in magazines. Because she'd had nothing to lose and everything to prove, and she'd done it anyway. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to be that brave again. Not by building more hotels or accumulating more wealth or proving anything to anyone, but by asking myself what I actually wanted. Not what I thought I should want. Not what would look good on paper or make a compelling story. What would make me happy. I drove back to Malibu slowly, taking the long way, letting the questions sit with me. When I got to the Harlow estate, I went straight to my suite and opened my laptop. I pulled up a document I'd started months ago and abandoned. A concept for something different, something smaller, more intimate. A retreat center, not a hotel, not a business built on occupancy rates and revenue per room, but a space designed for rest, for healing, for people who needed to step away from their lives and remember who they were beneath all the noise and performance and endless striving. I'd shelved the idea because it didn't make financial sense, because it wouldn't expand my empire, or increase my net worth, or generate the kind of buzz that Architectural Digest cared about. But looking at it now, I realized something. I didn't care. This was what I wanted to build. Not to prove anything, but because it mattered to me. Because it was the space I needed. The space the girl on the floor with her fabric swatches had been dreaming of all along, even if she hadn't known it yet. That evening I called Matthew. He answered on the second ring. Hey. I took a breath. I remembered what you said. That night, before you left. A long pause. You do? You said you wished you could be the man I saw when I looked at you. I heard him exhale. Yeah. I need you to know something, I said. You were that man. You just couldn't see it. His voice was thick when he spoke. Diane. No, listen. You were scared. I was scared. We were both kids trying to figure out who we were and what we wanted, and we got it wrong. But that doesn't mean you failed me. It just means we weren't ready. And now? He asked quietly. Now I'm ready. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. To forgive you, to forgive myself, to stop building my life around old wounds and start building it around new dreams. That sounds like a good plan. It is. I looked out at the ocean. The sky was turning gold. Thank you, Matthew, for coming back, for being honest, for helping me see what I'd been avoiding. Thank you for listening, he said, and for giving me the courage to stop running. We talked for a few more minutes. Light conversation, updates on our lives. The easy familiarity of two people who'd loved each other once, and would always carry a piece of that love, even as they moved forward separately. When we hung up, I felt it. Peace. Real, deep, uncomplicated peace. 3 months later, I broke ground on the retreat center in Big Sur. I still own the hotels. I still run my business. But now there's something else too. Something built not from fear or ambition or the need to prove anyone wrong, but from the quiet certainty that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. After I became a millionaire, my ex-husband insisted on a private talk. And what he gave me wasn't closure or apology, or even the validation I thought I'd been searching for. He gave me permission to stop running, to stop building walls and start building windows, to remember that success means nothing if you're too afraid to let anyone see who you really are beneath it. I stand on my balcony now, watching the sun set over the Pacific. And I think about that girl on the floor with her fabric swatches and her impossible dreams. She made it, not because she proved someone wrong, but because she finally proved herself right. And that was always enough. If this story touched you, leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for the next journey.